Over the course of more than 100 years, beginning in the 1800s, hundreds of thousands of Native American children in the U.S. were removed from their families, placed in federal boarding schools, and forced to abandon their native languages and culture. One college in Colorado, which is also one of the top Native American degree-conferring institutions in the country, is reckoning with that history. Special correspondent Sreenivasan reports for our Rethinking College series.
On a recent evening, the pounding of drums signaled the start of an annual tradition at Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado. After a 2-year hiatus due to the pandemic, a sold-out crowd packed the stands to watch the powwow, which dates back to the 1960s. While the mood was celebratory, the night's theme was somber, remembering those who never made it home. Those being honored? The unknown number of Native American children who died at Indian boarding schools around the country, including one with a historical connection to this college.
There has been a huge reckoning in this country to say that institutions must take a look at their own racialized history and understand the implications of that racialized history. For Fort Lewis College, that racialized history is embedded in the fact that we started as an Indian boarding school.
Tom Stridicus is the president of Fort Lewis College. Over the last 3 years, the school has been engaged in an effort to explore and acknowledge that history and provide a more supportive learning environment for Native American and Alaska Native students who make up about half of the school's enrollment. Stridicus says over the years, the college's history and long-standing Native American tuition waiver weren't a secret, but they also weren't widely understood by the campus community.
Native American tuition waivers, it's actually connected to the fact that the students who are attending today potentially had ancestors who were abused and traumatized by Native American boarding schools. Those things are connected. Indigenous communities paid a tremendous price because of federal Indian boarding schools.
This is the original boarding school site, a rural stretch of land about 15 miles from the Fort Lewis College campus, which moved to the current location in the 1950s. Today, the land is used by the college for agricultural education. Only 2 of the original buildings remain. For nearly 20 years, between 1891 and 1910, thousands of Native American children came to a boarding school here. They were stripped of their language, their culture, and frankly, their identity. The impacts of that cultural genocide are still being felt today.
My father grew up not learning the Dakota language because his parents made a difficult decision that my dad would be better served if he just spoke English without any accent. Many descendants of boarding school survivors know that experience.
Fort Lewis College Associate Professor Majel Boxer's grandparents attended boarding schools in other locations around the country. She's an enrolled member of the Fort Peck, Assiniboine, and Sioux tribes of northeastern Montana. Her research is focused on the history of the boarding school, which was called the Fort Lewis Indian School.
This building here served agricultural purposes.
While the original boarding school grounds have not yet been searched for unmarked graves, a bill has been introduced in the Colorado legislature that would fund culturally appropriate exploration later this year. Boxer says that process will be an important part of the healing.
The stories that are shared with me by Ute tribal elders are that they know children have passed away, and so part of that reconciliation includes that truth-telling.
The campus-wide reconciliation process now underway is due in large part to this woman.
I'm Jocelyn Lee, and I am assistant professor of chemistry here at Fort Lewis College. I am enrolled for the Pueblo of Laguna. They are one of the 19 tribes of New Mexico.
As a student at Fort Lewis College in the early 2000s and returning as a new faculty member in 2019, she was troubled by panels under the college's prominent clock tower that depicted the school's boarding school history and captions that included, quote, "The children are well clothed and happy."
So I did get upset again of this is an inappropriate representation, and I'm not too sure why we're still allowing that to be shared.
She sent an email to President Stridicus about her concerns in August of 2019, and he agreed. The Fort Lewis College History Committee was soon formed to begin a concerned introspection of the school's boarding school history. One big step in that process was removing the boarding school panels during a special ceremony last year.
It felt good to be listened to after raising the concern, than to have our college president just simply say, "You're right, let's remove them." And then we spent a good year in town halls to see how we could improve our campus and our understanding of the Indian school history.
Other new efforts include an Indigenous language revitalization program, 3 new faculty hires in the Native American and Indigenous Studies Department, and a land acknowledgement before college events and in classes at the start of each semester.
Good evening, everybody. The land that we gather on tonight here at Fort Lewis College is situated upon the ancestral homelands and territories of the Nuchu people who were forcibly removed by the United States government.
Senior Noah Shadlow, an enrolled member of the Osage Nation, says he's seen a change in the campus culture since reconciliation began.
I feel more recognized. I feel more acknowledged on this campus rather than how it was before, where it's just like, oh, there's just some Indian kids over there, you know, they're not doing nothing.
But he says there is still work to be done.
I would like to see more Indigenous staff here on campus. A big thing that we need here is Indigenous counselor. It's kind of hard to talk with a counselor who doesn't, you know, share your cultural identity.
For President Striticus, a big part of the work still to be done is getting students across the finish line. The college's 6-year graduation rate for Native American students is about 30%, slightly below the national rate. Before the pandemic, the school was starting to see some gains in first-year retention rates.
The pandemic has definitely eroded those gains, but I think that when we put the notions around academic support together with sort of the broad, culturally responsive work we're doing in terms of acknowledging the importance of Native culture, we'll pick back up the gains that we started to see before the pandemic.
For Jocelyn Lee, the work over the last few years has been meaningful.
I think this has opened up a lot of discussion on how we can start to learn more about each other's culture. So I'm hoping that this is a more holistic approach to learning about each other so that we can all start to get along better.
There's been a steady uptick in the number of Native American students enrolling over the last 4 years, and the college expects a record number of applications this spring. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Sreenivasan in Durango, Colorado.
So important to know that history.